welcome to KU's Summer Community Webinar Series. I'm joined by Jean-Luc Gerret from the Khalifa Innovation Centre to discuss exponential technologies, exponential organisations and platform business models. So let's start. What's an exponential technology?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. Exponential technologies is probably one of these words which is a bit new to our jargon, but exponential technologies is really about all these new technologies that have potentially a massive impact on society. These are technologies which are, in a sense, transformational. We can talk about things like artificial intelligence, blockchain to a certain extent, and one of the commonalities with these technologies is that they are complex. They take a long time to learn. They might not produce results right away. So they tend to be a bit deceptive initially. But once you master the technology, once you start understanding how it works, once you start to get it rolling, then it starts to grow exponentially. And that means that with these technologies, for instance, we can solve new types of problems we were not able to solve before because we didn't have the computing power, we didn't have the algorithms, we were not able to maybe automate some things. But now with these exponential technologies, we can actually start tackling some of the societal challenges as well, like climate change, pollution, and so on. Just think about, we could say autonomous driving is also something which will have a massive impact on society. But to solve that problem, we had to work on different type of underlying technologies as well when it comes to batteries, to the algorithms, to be able to drive autonomously. We needed to have the right type of sensors at the right type of price. But now that the technology is getting ready, that type of technology will have a massive impact on society. So exponential technologies is really about these technologies that can start slowly but then grow very rapidly and can help us solve some of these massive problems and that humanity has or that we have as a society.
So that's big problems needing big solutions.
Exactly. And this is a lot what exponential technologies are about. I can give one example. Artificial intelligence, for instance, is one of these exponential technologies. If you look at artificial intelligence, first of all, it takes a very long time to learn. It's complex. It's many different algorithms, many different techniques that you need to learn, that you need to understand. Otherwise, you will not get the right type of results. But also, when we talk about AI, it's a lot about machine learning. So the solutions provided, they become better and better as you have more data. So getting the right type of data also takes time. So, artificial intelligence, for instance, is one of these technologies. Starts very slowly because you need to learn the techniques, the algorithms, but then also you need to collect the data. But once your engine is tuned, then it can solve problems in a very mechanical way and in a very fast way.
It sounds like they'll have quite an impact on business models then.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things also to consider when we look at all these new technologies is how will they transform our existing business models. So when you look at all these innovations, they can potentially innovate, but also completely disrupt our business models. And I'd like to go back to give you an example and be very concrete about that. Just think about the following. Today, we have more and more people that are starting to use shared driving or mobility on demand, and that's how Uber become very popular, right? So Uber is, for instance, massive startup valued at billions of dollars, but could they potentially be disrupted? So consider the following. Last year, Elon Musk made an announcement about Teslas being able to become robo-taxis. So if you think about that, you don't need an Uber anymore to to basically hail your taxi. You could basically, every individual could put their Tesla on the network and provide their Tesla as a taxi service to others and make money from their car.
Right.
So this will change the notion of ownership, because maybe my car will suddenly become an asset that gives me dividends because it's put on a network, it gives me money. While before, ownership was maybe a problem because it's mostly a cost, but now it can generate new revenue. So there's a change in me as an end user and the way they look at the car, but also it could potentially disrupt companies like Uber. And this is all because now we have autonomous driving that is around the corner, and autonomous driving is enabled by artificial intelligence, which is one of these exponential technologies. So this is really where we will see changes in the business model. We will see more and more business models that are driven by data, by artificial intelligence. Even if you take an Uber today, even there's an element of technology, an element of data which allows Uber to scale, and that is the algorithms. So today, or traditionally, I would say, if you look at a taxi hailing company, you'd call the customer care center, and the dispatcher would send a taxi. There's no dispatcher anymore. This is all algorithms. This is all data-driven. The taxis, they're actually directed by algorithms and robots, not by humans. It's the data that basically is a starting point to transforming many of the business models.
Is that then an example of a platform business model?
Yeah, so exactly. So Uber is so that's another thing to consider in the business model innovation, business model transformation, is that platform business models have been emerging. So companies leveraging more and more technology to allow their business model to scale very rapidly. Now, the platform business model is a business model where you match supply and demand. So in the Uber case, match passengers to drivers. All of this is done through algorithms. All of this is done using automation. And basically that platform then, since it's not people that are driving the processes, but algorithms, it can then scale very, very rapidly. On top of that, these companies, they don't own any of the cars. So the onboarding of drivers is done in an intelligent way through software as well, and that means it can also include taxis much faster as the demand grows. Platform business models are not that new. I mean, Uber is an example. Airbnb is an example. Airbnb is exactly the same. They're matching supply of rental space and they match that with traveler demand. And all of that, again, it's done through data, it's done through algorithms. More and more artificial intelligence is going to be used to personalize things. And again, no asset is owned by Airbnb. So they're the largest hotel company, but they don't own any hotels. So all that scalability is enabled by technology, exponential technology like artificial intelligence.
It sounds like it takes a lot of the guesswork out of matching your supply with your demand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of traditional processes are manual. Now with data, you can do things much more accurately as long as you have the right type of data. So that can help you, do a better matching between demand and supply, absolutely.
Can you just expand on ecosystem innovation and open innovation?
Right. So another thing to consider is that when you build these platforms, when we look at demand and supply, it's not only about consumer services. It's not only about, let's say, a traveler that wants a hotel. It can be more complex. It can also be a company that becomes an orchestrator in an ecosystem. So for instance, if you look at the government, for instance, when the government puts in place blockchain infrastructure or blockchain technology, they can onboard different service providers, whether it's ministries or other companies, and then basically orchestrate the needs on one side to the supply on the other side. So there's much more smarter orchestration that can be done through these platforms. So often for a company or government, it's important to become that orchestrator. So the platform, in a sense, becomes an enabler for them to grow their business or to grow their offering by being able to onboard different types of suppliers and then matching new types of needs, new types of demand. You could say there's similar things happening with e-commerce platforms where you have different companies selling through Amazon, for instance, and then basically they do the whole deliveries, they do the shipping, they do even the inventory management, but you can sell through the platform. So they're not only selling their products, they're onboarding suppliers that can then sell to satisfy different types of demand.
Okay, so they're working as the facilitator but also growing themselves.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. When you're the orchestrator in the ecosystem, you end up being a broker in a sense, and you can take commissions on that and then basically can scale your business around that.
And can you tell us a bit about this 10 times framework from Singularity University?
So when you look at how certain companies have managed to scale massively. We talk about the Google, the Facebook, the Alibaba, the Amazons and others. Universities, researchers, economists have all tried to analyze a bit. So is there some kind of commonality between these companies? And basically there was some research done by Singularity University that basically looked at these commonalities, and by analyzing them, they realized that there's some similarities in the business model. So what they've done is that they developed a framework which is called the 10X framework, and that framework is all about how do you scale? How can you scale a company by making sure that your business model can scale? So they analyzed the business model and they looked at different parts of the business model and see how each element in your business model needed to scale. So for instance, when you look at the part about processes and resources and the internal parts of delivering services, one of the key elements is to become data-driven, algorithm-driven. So one of the elements is really about making sure that you're not limited by having manual processes, because then it's linear, then you're limited by what people can do. But if you're driven by data and algorithms, then you're just limited by the computing power, and that is something you can buy on demand. So that's just one example. Similarly, when you engage with your customers, you don't want to do it on a one-on-one basis. You want to do it maybe through digital channels here also, where you can automate things, where there's not going to be any limitations. If you have to open a store every time you want to sell a service, again, you will have scalability issues. So in each of these parts of the business model, they basically come up with the recommendations on how to make sure that particular part of the business model is scalable as well. So that's really the essence of the 10X framework. Additionally, that framework is intended to be used a bit at not only scaling businesses 10X, but also trying to solve some of these massive problems that we have either as a society or a company. And then basically they also introduce some notions we have seen, like agility and the notion of sprints. So for instance, they come up with a methodology also where you work with problem sprints, solution sprints, go-to-market sprints. So basically trying to accelerate each of the phases I talked about earlier in the innovation process, in the previous interview actually, in the innovation process. Trying to accelerate these will also allow you to have a faster path to solving some of these big problems.
So is that how we define an exponential organization?
That's a good question. The exponential organization is a bit related to exponential business models, right? So if your business model is not scalable, your organization cannot scale either. But the fundamentals also of an exponential organization is a bit related to the mindsets. So it's about growth mindset. It's about thinking about constantly growing, removing the limits. And then that means also changing your business model so that your business model is not limited by some of the constraints we have if we do things one by one, for instance. So this is a lot what exponential organization is about. It's also about onboarding people in a more dynamic way. So today, a lot of our organizations, they tend to scale linearly and they're a bit constrained by their workforce. But an organization, an exponential organization is a bit similar, if you want, also to what I mentioned with Airbnb, is that you don't necessarily own all the assets or own all the resources. So an exponential organization is also about being able to work with partners that can provide that scalability for the organization as well, on-demand workforce, on-demand partners, and that growth mindset.
So to sum up then, everything needs to have that element of growth, from the exponential technology to the platforms to the exponential organizations themselves. It's all about growth.
Exactly, and I think this is also where you can start tying some of the visionary things we see in the UAE is that once you have that long-term vision on how you want the country and the society to look differently, to act differently, you start setting these milestones that seem unreachable. But then when you start to apply a growth mindset, when you start to apply exponential technologies, you start progressively seeing a path which is more and more realistic toward that vision, which initially seems completely, utopic to a certain extent. But this is what this mindset changes and these approaches are all about. And at the heart, at the bottom, again, it goes back to, deep technologies like what we are developing at the university and also what we try to commercialize at Khalifa Innovation Center, artificial intelligence, robotics, all of these are things that are part of this agenda of growth and, in a sense, creating exponential organizations.
Brilliant. Jean-Luc, thank you for participating in this webinar.
Thank you for having me, and looking forward to see you at Khalifa Innovation Center.